He was too scared to turn around, but he thought he felt disgustingly warm air behind him. Then he heard it again, barara, damn, it's no good, it's aiming right for us, you know what to do right everyone. The response to the leader Boris's cry was magic spells, reinforce armor, lesser strength, all right. In that case Marquis Revan, we'll go to intercept it. Please just run without looking back. There was only one thing he could say to his men who had overcome their fear. Thank you, okay, let us do this. Arg. Marquis Revan could tell from the sounds that the distance between the horses of the former Orichalcum-plated adventurers behind him and his own was growing. He ducked his head to maintain a position that would lessen the drag of the wind. He wasn't sure how much time they could buy, but fleeing as fast as he could and making it back alive was the best way to pay respect to their faithful service. Fly, fireball, impenetrable fortress. As he rode at the whims of his horse, the voices of the former adventurers, who seemed to be engaging in battle, reached his ears even against the wind whipping past him. But 2 seconds later, he couldn't hear them anymore. He could hear only the pounding of huge hooves. His heart jolted. He bit back a scream when he saw in his lowered field of vision a shadow falling across the earth. Noticing the huge shadow over him, though he fled at top speed, he grasped the fact that something long and thick was reaching out. The horse galloped in a frenzy. It was already going faster than Marquis Revan could control. It had probably never run so fast in its life. Still, the shadow remained. I hate this. It was a shriek. He hadn't even intended to scream, but it was extremely loud. He felt something warm in his crotch. He opened his eyes wide, but still unable to look behind him, he just kept riding. He couldn't die yet. He didn't care what became of the kingdom. If the country was going to be destroyed, let it be destroyed. If antagonizing Aints Ulgaun meant death, then he would abandon his country and flee. How stupid. He was so stupid. He was a fool for coming to this battlefield. He knew how powerful Aints Ulgaun was, so he should have done anything to stay in the royal capital. He wished he hadn't given any thought to the kingdom's future. I hate this. He couldn't die yet. An image of a child appeared before him. It was his adorable son. That tiny life had been gradually growing up. Sometimes he got sick. The Marquis remembered the fuss he had made then. He was mortified, thinking back to the way he had screamed at his bewildered wife, half mad with worry, those chubby hands and rosy cheeks. He was sure the boy would grow into a young man who would be spoken of throughout the kingdom. The Marquis believed the boy would surpass him. He had already caught glimpses of his potential. His wife said he was biased as a parent, but that was definitely not the case. He was so deeply grateful to his wife for bearing his precious child, although he was ashamed to say it too often. He had even been thinking of having another. He shouldn't have come to this battlefield. He should have stayed where he could hold those two in his arms. The pounding of the hooves stopped. When Marquis Revan turned around, more out of curiosity than bravery, he saw the dark young had ceased moving, as if they were frozen. With no idea where he was, he felt he had been plunged into a world of nightmares. The four that title of the Baharuth Empire's strongest warriors seemed surprisingly superficial now. He'd been so proud of it. What a puny, pathetic creature that made him. That was how great a shock he had received. Nimble could hear muffled crying. These were the sobs of those whose fear and anxiety had broken their limits. They were the mournful cries of children, yes, men who had regressed to children. The ones crying were Imperial Knights. There were tons of them. He heard someone pleading, run. These were the solemn wishes of those who felt horrible for the ones swallowed up in that crucible, the gruesome slaughter taking place before their eyes. The kingdom had met such tragedy that their enemies, the Imperial Knights, were praying for them. They hoped that even one more might escape. They had come to kill one another, but faced with such brutal slaughter, any human would be moved to compassion. Anyone who didn't feel something in this situation was a heartless brute, not a human. And Nimble and the other knights realized this was not merely a fire on the far shore. If they thought about the situation in terms of kingdom and empire, the fire was indeed on the other side. But if one thought in terms of humans and monsters, the fire was undoubtedly close. The Imperial Knights thought of the kingdom's soldiers as fellow humans, shedding tears at the tragedy they endured. All right, I guess now good. Reacting to Aints' low voice, all eyes focused on him. With 60,000 men gathered, he hadn't been loud enough for those at the edges to hear, but they could tell the man next to them had turned his head. And since they knew that Aints Ulgaun was the focus of that gaze, It was only logical to follow suit and look, because everyone was terrified of his every move. Aints Ulgaun was the father of this nightmare. Aints slowly removed his mask. A white skull with neither skin nor flesh peered out. Outside of this situation, they might have thought he was wearing a mask beneath his mask, but it hit Nimble, and probably all the Imperial Knights, like a ton of bricks. This was his real face. Aints Ulgaun was a monster. They could accept it because their instincts already told them that a human could never wield so much power. Aints slowly opened his arms. It was like he was going to hug a friend. It was also like a demon spreading its wings. It felt like he had expanded to double his size. Stillness. Aints' gentle voice was bizarrely loud against the backdrop of the distant kingdom soldiers' screams. Applaud. Nimble stared at Aints agape, wondering what he could possibly be talking about. It seemed that everyone within earshot felt the same way. As Aints' word was passed on in whispers, the number of eyes on him grew. While everyone simply trained their eyes on him, Aints spoke again. Applaud my supreme might. The first one to clap was Mare, who was standing on the other side of Aints from Nimble. As if that woke everyone up, a scattering of applause turned into a thunderous roar. Of course, it wasn't genuine. None of them wanted to clap for someone who orchestrated such a cruel slaughter. That wasn't war but a massacre. It was a massacre of unimaginable scale, but there wasn't anyone who could say that. The thunderous applause showed the knights' fear. It didn't seem possible for it to grow any louder, but they raised the voltage another few notches. This was because one of the black goats slowly changed course. It was facing the Imperial army. Along with the clapping came cheers like a war cry. The screams of the Imperial Knights in praise of Aints Ulgaun practically brought blood streaming from their throats, but the black goat's feet didn't stop, so the knights raised their voices even higher, thinking it wasn't stopping because their voices hadn't satisfied him. But it didn't stop. That's when they snapped. Who knows who moved first? It might have been just one of the knights shuddering, but the fear that had been poured into them readily burst forth. IRRG. Wails from the depths of their souls could be heard here and there around the Imperial camp. The army was shaken. Terrified by the crisis of one of the monsters that had overrun the kingdom's army, now closing in on them, some knights abandoned their paralyzed horses and made a run for it. They had just been given a glimpse of hell. No matter how feeble their imaginations, each person thought he would be next. The terror was contagious. At first, there had been only 100 or so runners, but their number increased by the second. Soon it had expanded to 60,000. Yes, the Imperial army as a whole fell into a frightened panic. Its discipline collapsed. It was an ugly rout. Naturally, the knights had been taught how to withdraw properly. But they didn't have the composure to maintain discipline. In order to get away even 1 second faster, in order to get even one step closer to safety, they shoved their friends out of their way with all their might and ran. If someone was pushed from behind, he couldn't avoid losing his balance and falling. And if someone fell, the ones fleeing in terror behind him were about to give him time to stand up. Those who fell were crushed under the feet of the next men. The Imperial enemy was racking up casualties not at their enemy's hand, but at their own. Nimble was at his wit's end. He had no idea what to do. He wanted to run like everyone else, but he wouldn't be permitted to do that. Plus, not all the knights had run away. When he surveyed the position, a handful of men were still on their horses, unmoving. It wasn't that they were too scared to run. They were thrilled to witness overwhelming power that humans could never hope to achieve. If a normal person saw a huge tornado heading straight for them, they would immediately try to get away. But others, despite knowing they would get killed, would be struck by the tornado's beauty and rendered immobile. The ones remaining were that sort of heretic. When the dark young arrived before Aints, it bent its legs and lowered its tentacles. It must have been showing respect. The monster's unmonster-like pose made a twitching grin appear on Nimble's face. The young should have been spattered in blood, but the reason it didn't appear to be was that its skin had absorbed everything. Aints sat on one of the tentacles, and several more reached down to stabilize and lift him up. The monster put him on its head. The plan was for me to hit them with one spell. Then the Imperial army would charge, but it doesn't look like that's going to happen. Nimble didn't say a word. It was true. The Empire had broken the contract proposed by the king of its ally, but he couldn't very well chew out the knights who had lost their nerve. He would probably defend their actions even before Jerknev. That was how overpowering the fear had been. Oh, I am not blaming you. I can understand assuming that if you had charged, you might have been trampled along with them. If something like that had happened, I never would have been able to explain it to the Emperor. So well, I'll work hard enough for both of us. Nimble glanced at the undead standing at attention. Are you going to send in those undead forces? Nah, I summoned these goats, after all, so I'll leave it up to them and just do a little cleanup. Mayor Dante, drop your guard. No, sir, you can count on me, Lord Aints. Nimble was stunned. There was going to be a follow-up attack. It would come from the one who could use such devastating magic. He could see an insatiable appetite for slaughter. This caster didn't plan to let anyone leave the battlefield alive. How can I put this? Haven T, you done enough. Are you a demon? He meant to whisper it, but his voice came out louder than expected. Aints atop the black goat turned his horrible face toward Nimble. As Nimble inwardly trembled in terror, Aints shook his head. Don't misunderstand. I am an undead. He was explaining that he wasn't an evil-doing demon, but a life-hating undead. That was why he wouldn't let a single kingdom soldier escape to take more lives. It made sense, but it was also the worst reply possible. If Aints was slaughtering the living because he was an undead, then he would likely turn next on the Empire, another nation of the living. No, that was a future that would surely come to pass. Wondering what to do, under assault by confusion and fear, and lacking concentration, Nimble missed the last thing Aints murmured. Seems like we found who we were looking for. Ramposa III's position was at the rearmost area of the Kingdom's army. Countless nobles' flags fluttered there. Until a little while ago, there had been a great many nobles around, but few remained. Most of them had fled. Those left could be counted very quickly. He wasn't angry at the court nobles for running away. You should leave me and run too. You jest, your majesty. Please escape as fast as you can. If one of those comes, no one can save you. The vice captain of the Royal Select gave the suggestion. Escape and do what? Your majesty, even if you remain here, there's nothing for you to do. Return to Rantle, that's where the counterattack will begin. Don't you think? Ramposa III smiled wryly. The suggestion grated on his ear. You have one thing right. There's definitely nothing I can do here. Under the circumstances, he wouldn't be able to rally the broken, routed army. It wasn't just him, it would be next to impossible no matter how great the commander. Your majesty, there's no time left. Men, get him out of here even if you have to tie him up. Gazef's subordinates leaped into action. Having decided that pointlessly remaining any longer would only endanger both his life and the lives of the others, Ramposa III stood up. All right. I'll go, but do you really think we'll get away if we run now? The earthquake-like footfalls were growing rapidly closer. Even in such a crisis, Ramposa III's tone was calm. It couldn't even be compared to the chaotic voices of the nobles who had been there up until moments before. It has to be impossible. If we try to escape on horseback, they'll definitely give chase. They seem to be prioritizing attacks on people running in large groups, so this is the only chance we have. Ramposa III realized that was why they had put a whole mass of nobles on their horses and packed them off earlier. So you will run and escape. He saw that a handful of the warriors had removed their armor and cast it aside. These men will carry your majesty to safety. What about you? Not all the men had taken off their armor. The vice captain and others were still wearing theirs. We were going to distract them by fleeing on our horses in the opposite direction. Ramposa III understood the warriors' feelings from the beautiful smiles on their faces. No, you ray our country's treasures. Do whatever you must to survive. I need you to serve my successor, of course. We were going to act as bait, but we don't intend to die. That was a lie. They did intend to die. No, they knew their fate was death. Ramposa III tried to persuade them, but the words wouldn't come out. Seeing their smiles, he felt like anything he said could only scratch the surface. The surrounding warriors began to remove Ramposa III's armor. A warrior in white armor stepped forward. It was Climb. He had exerted himself thus far as the only subordinate of the king's daughter, Princess Rena. I'll also act as a diversion. I don't know if those monsters have eyes or not, but if I wave a flag, maybe I can catch their attention. This armor makes for a good target as well. Climb had the Kingdom's flag in his hands. The dirty footprints from where fleeing soldiers had stepped on it hinted at how dire their situation was. Arg, then I'll go with you. Brain Unglaus stood next to him. Ramposa III's most trusted aide, Gaze of Stronov, said the man was a warrior equal to himself. Brain had joined this battle on behalf of Renna. He was essentially in the same category as Climb. Are you sure? You aren't even a true subordinate of the princess. What's that now? Don't worry about it. I jumped onto the front line during the demon disturbance and lived. I'll just pray good luck comes my way again. And I'll pray for you too. The gods won't give up on us. They sent us a hero during the demon disturbance. I believe they'll bring us good luck again this time. Brain and the Vice Captain Fist bumped in front of Ramposa III and went their separate ways. How horrible, where did I go wrong? Ramposa III groaned. Probably none of the warriors before his eyes would survive. The Vice Captain and Climb would die as bait. And what would become of Gazef, who rode off to stop the Dark Young? His eyes grew hot. He wanted to say, forgive me. They were throwing away their lives, their futures, to distract the enemy from an old man. But there was no way he could say such a thing. Though resigned to their deaths, they intended to struggle. In that case, return safely to Rantel. You'll have whatever you wish as a reward. Climb and Brain had started walking, but they turned around. I don't need a reward, Your Majesty. Princess Renna saved me. I couldn't possibly ask for anything more. My wish is for you to give my favorite kid in the kingdom the most beautiful princess as his bride. Ha 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 ha. That's quite a reward you're asking for. Brain, what are you saying? I would have to start by giving that kid a peerage. Well, let us work hard. Now you really have to live through this and make it back. Climb just blinked furiously with his mouth hanging open. His warrior-esque determination of a moment ago vanished. Ramposa III forgot everything and smiled merrily in spite of himself. Now then, Your Majesty, I am counting on you. Ramposa III's armor had been removed, so the warriors picked him up. Your Majesty, whether we can escape like this or not will depend on luck. If anything should, well, please forgive us. That's fine. I decided to use your idea. If our luck is bad, then there's no helping it. All right, Your Majesty, see you in Rantel. The Vice Captain and the others rode off on their horses. As if it had been waiting for that cue, the Dark Young changed directions. Okay, let us go while everyone is drawing its attention. Among the turmoil of panicked soldiers, Gazef gazed steadily ahead and drew the kingdom's treasure, Razor Edge. He always won when he unsheathed this sword with its icy gleam. One could say the sword was proof of Gazef's victories, but today it looked awfully feeble. Gazef was just so small compared to the huge Dark Young making a beeline for him. If you get past me, you'll reach the king's position. Don't mind if I stop you here, Gazef said with a smile. It was a self-deprecating grin. Gazef had no chance of winning against the monster. Stopping it for so much as a second would be admirable, even for the captain of the Royal Select, the warrior whose name was known in all the nearby countries. Even for a man like him, take the king and run, lay down your lives if necessary. Gazef gave orders to men who wear NT present his subordinates as if he was praying. He had left the kingdom's strongest soldiers behind to guard the king. Of course they would succeed in protecting him from the savagery of those monsters. Even if they gave their lives, probably the most they could accomplish was to take a single attack as a meat shield. But that actually did mean success. If they took a hit, they would probably die, but if they could get their opponent to waste even one blow, then the king would live longer. It even became possible to hope that maybe, with 80 meat shields with his eyes fixed on the monster, which scattered blood and flesh as it rapidly approached, Gazef apologized to his men. They were NT with him, but he knew that even if he had told them directly, it would have been only for self-satisfaction. Still, he would have hated to die without saying it. Gazef exhaled sharply, feeling the ground shake beneath him. Then he held up the sword gripped tightly in his hand. How tenuous his blade seemed against the hulking form crushing humans as it closed in. If it had been a runaway carriage, he would have been able to stop it, no problem. If it had been a pouncing tiger, he could have dodged and immediately cut its head off. But he didn't have much of a chance of surviving a Dark Young. Exhaled deeply. At the same time, the flow of the people around him changed dramatically. Up until a moment ago, it had been a confused torrent. Now they parted around him. They essentially created a straight path between him and the Dark Young. Stomping more and more people apart beneath its feet, the Dark Young drew nearer. With his sword up, Gazef observed its entire body. Where could he attack that would be most effective? He used the martial art detect weak point, but no weak spots. Did that mean it really had no weaknesses, or that the gap between their abilities was so great that they couldn't be read? Gazef didn't know, but he didn't lose hope. That outcome was within the realm of the expected. He used another martial art. It was a fairly big move, an ability that could be explained as a boost to the user's sixth sense possibility perception. The difference in their physical abilities was so great that even if he boosted his physical strength, he would close the gap only slightly. Instead, he figured it would be better to rely on something else, his sixth sense. See Moan Monster. As if the Dark Young heard his voice and listened, it headed straight for Gazef. The distance between them shrank before his eyes. Let us be honest, Gazef was scared. If it would have been permissible, he would have rather run away with the other soldiers. Even with possibility perception, he didn't sense anything. It was like being hurled into a completely black night. Once the Dark Young was closer, he could observe its condition in detail. Given the lack of scratches on its hooves, it was possible a mere sword wouldn't be enough to cut it.